JC Shurburtt here, Gamecock fans. Sunday, bloody Sunday, so to speak, around the South Carolina football program, also around college football. Hugh Freeze just got fired at Auburn, so another firing. But wanted to come here with you and discuss really quick uh, as a special emergency pod. I guess that's what they call it in the podcast industry. But yeah, it's time to kind of talk about this. Mike Shula fired as the Gamecocks OC after 9 games. Like as someone that covers this stuff and as someone that analyzes this stuff and has a long association, covering the Gamecocks and just digging into this football program. This move should have been made a long time ago, quite frankly. I'm not, I think it's a good day for Gamecock football that the head coach decided to, make this move. I think when you're going down, and they are at 3-6 with the third-ranked team in the country coming up in a couple of weeks, and then Clemson and Coastal and Clemson at the end of the year, a Coastal team that's playing better, and I'm not so sure that wouldn't have been a really tight one, and maybe even a loss had Carolina not made this move. And like I said on the BigSpur.com earlier today with my game thoughts, Lenore Sellers did not play well last night. So those of you that, said that, yeah. But the whole operation of the offense, last drive of the first half, and then with 11 minutes to go, you're down 9, and you keep running it and huddling up. And Carolina had 27 yards, a 27-yard drive, 12 plays, and ran like 7 minutes off the clock, ended up getting sacked a couple of times, and then Kawan Lacey to the house. That's the ball game. That's it. So there just wasn't much in the tank there. And again, I'm sorry, but let me finish my point there about going down with the ship. If you're going to go down with the ship, go down swinging. And I think that's what Shane Beamer's doing. You gotta get the water out. You gotta throw the heavy stuff overboard. You got to do everything you can. And this was a move, I think should have happened a while back. The Lonnie Teasley move probably should have happened a while back. But that's that there. Um, you know, you see these things, and like I said, you're happy from a Gamecock standpoint. As I get older, maybe I'm getting soft. I don't know. Coaches tend to take firings pretty well, but Mike Shula was a good man, connected with the players. I think in his role last year, he was doing a fantastic job. Just kind of being a quarterback guru and coach. If you look at his career, he's never really been known for play calling, even in the NFL level. But, the thought process there was neither was Dowell Loggins. Dowell had a bunch of bad teams and stuff like that. And, he ended up getting it. And Shula was the coach at Alabama and coached in college before, but it was just bad. Lenore Sellers looked like an NFL rookie out there. It reminded me of watching Caleb Williams last year in a bad offense with a bad coordinator at the NFL level. Just no block. I mean, just a lot of stuff that went wrong. But it's a sad day, for a certain standpoint, because I feel bad for anybody that is a good person that loses their job. Sometimes people that aren't good people lose their job, and I could care less. But I think that that's sad, from my standpoint. But and because by all accounts, everybody liked him and stuff. But for Gamecock football, it's a new day and it's a happy day because at least the head coach is trying everything he can. Kirby Smart said this, and Beamer sort of parroted it in the press conference when he fired Lonnie Teasley. In coaching as the leader of the program, the worst part about it is you have to make decisions that negatively impact people you care about. And that's just one of those things. It's just one of those things that happens. So, who knows? Who knows? Um, and I don't think coaches would be coaching if they couldn't take this. So there's the silver lining. Fury and Elliott taking over. And I went back and looked at some limestone stuff, and that were when Mike was there. It's don't get scared off because you're going to read if you dig into the history, you're going to read some stuff about the NFL. where Mike Fury obviously was a good player on both sides of the ball. Um, and obviously coached for the Bears. That wasn't my favorite offense that Matt Nagy ran with the Chicago Bears, but he was a receivers coach there. But at Limestone, that offense schematically was a scaled back college style version of the greatest show on turf, which was, if you remember, those of you that are old enough, the St. Louis Rams with Mike Martz, which back then, Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, all those guys, that was a college style offense. Torrey Holt, I think, was part of that. It was a college style offense that worked in the NFL, kind of took it by storm for a while. And it looks like it when you go back and watch Limestone film. So some people worry, and it's a legit concern because you're heading in a different direction and you only have 2 weeks. But I did see a question on the message board that said, well, they got a week to install a new offense. That's true and not. I think the problem wasn't the playbook. The playbook was massive and, maybe a little too massive, but they have lots of plays, and I think the problem was calling it and how to call it in a college setting. And it looked, like I said, like an NFL rookie was out there running an NFL offense and in an NFL game, and that's you see guys straight out of college struggle with doing that type of thing. Regardless if they scale it back or not. It's a lot of reads, it's a lot of different options. It just does not work consistently. You can take pieces, folks. You can take pieces of an NFL offense, but that's what it is. It's pieces. You got to call it like college. And then last night, man, it just got sad. It was sad. And I know Lenore's missed some passes, but with the way things were ran on offense, who knows? Vandrevius Jacobs catches that pass at the 20 when Carolina's up 7-3. There's no guarantee they're going to score. They've been terrible in the red zone. They haven't even gotten in the red zone a whole lot this year. I mean, you really look at the numbers. I don't think I haven't talked about the numbers enough because they're so embarrassing that I'm like, well, surely this offense is better than the numbers because there's players, 99. Go back that far. You know what happened then. There's a bunch of Langston Moore, who had a stellar career as defensive tackle, now is a children's book author, and everybody knows Langston. He had to start at offensive guard because everybody was hurt. They started walk-ons and converted wide receivers. I mean, that was a dumpster fire year for good reason for Lou Holtz. This year, there's no reason for the offense to be this bad, especially in a year where you have some really good defenses out there, but the SEC's not full of these defensive juggernauts. Georgia's a little down on defense. Alabama's a little down on defense. LSU teams can score on them when they have a plan. We've all seen. And they made the Ole Miss defense look like the 85 Bears yesterday. And there's no reason for that. Even if you don't have a good offensive line, which they don't. So, I'm glad to see the actual overall NFL style play calling leave. It needs to go the way of the dodo bird moving forward, no matter who Shane Beamer hires full time as the OC. With Fury specifically, though, I did want to point out that if you go do some research on his offense at Limestone, you're going to read some stuff about it. Don't let that freak you out because it's, from what I've seen, proof on tape. It doesn't look anything. It's a college offense. They go really fast. Will they go fast? I don't know. The head coach has to determine that. But I think this is, regardless of what happens the last 3 games, maybe these guys don't do any better, but at least you give yourself a chance. And I just don't think everything from the game planning to the play calling to the philosophy, look, you've got a team that cannot run the football, between the tackles, and your offense is based on stubbornly almost running the ball between the tackles. You don't have the backs to do it. You don't have the offensive line to do it. You really don't have the quarterback to do it. Lenoris is not a power run up the middle quarterback. He's a get it on the edge and go guy. When Louis Riddick yesterday on the broadcast was just very blunt and honest about the whole thing. And when that starts to happen, you know that a change has to come. I mean, Louis Riddick's forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. He just he backed everything up. It's just a bad plan. It's just a plan that's not applicable to today's college game. And you made a defense in Ole Miss I don't think they're a bad defense. I think they're a good front, but their secondary has been bad. And so because Lenora Sellers misses on a couple of throws, you quit trying to attack him down the field or roll him out and get him going. I mean, the things they did against Alabama that seemed to work, they seem to revert on that. I mean, it had to be the last straw for Shane Beamer. Uh, I do think it's fair to question why it took 9 games because this was obvious to a lot of folks, myself included. After about 3, maybe 4, 4, I'll give them the Missouri. Well, Kentucky game, I really started to worry because that was not a good defense. I think Missouri's got a pretty good D. But that was not a good defense. And then everybody's sitting there happy because they ran it up the middle successfully and ran out the clock. I say Kentucky didn't have a good defense. They got Hugh Freeze fired. He didn't score a touchdown in his last game, but that's a different problem down there. Um, only 3 offensive touchdowns, and your defense really was the catalyst for all that. Just like last night, 14 points, not good enough. But they did not have a drive for a score, folks. They got one off the muff punt early, then did not capitalize on getting the ball back after holding them to the field goal. Defense played great last night. I'll have more game thoughts and things like that and coffee tomorrow. And tonight on Rooster Rant, by the way, I'm going to sit in with Matt and Alex, so be sure to check that out at Chief Sports Network right here on YouTube. We're going to get started about 7. But you didn't capitalize on that. And then the other touchdown was a bomb to Nick Harbor. And then they just kept trying to do that late. There's more weapons out there than that. Brian Rowe, for example, needs the ball more. I feel worse for Vandrevius Jacobs than any other player on the team. This guy was lighting it up, and all of a sudden he hadn't had a catch since, how long has it been, folks? A month? And either Lenore's can't hit him or he's just not getting the ball. They don't throw the ball. They don't throw it enough, and you've had 2 games now against Kentucky and against Ole Miss where the weakness in their defense was their secondary. And you're out there still trying to establish some power run. Sometimes you got to run it with your quarterback around the edge and let him manufacture yardage. If in the second half, when Carolina slowed Kewan Lacey from Ole Miss, that's what Lane Kiffin did. And what was sad about last night, and again, I'll get into the actual game a lot tomorrow and tonight, but Trinidad Chambliss was off passing the ball. He hit some, obviously. Ole Miss is going to do that to you, but man, you couldn't take advantage of that at all. And the defense buckled down, held them to field goals in bad situations. And here you are running 7 minutes off the clock. I think they ran up the middle to Rasul Faison 4 straight times. Well, look, it's all well and good. They were getting first downs, and then they had to pass, and it was over. But don't you think that running that much time off the clock? I mean, then the timeout thing too. And I'm like, that's another thing I'll get into because the head coaching decisions were not stellar either. Again, for the other game, or for another game on Saturday night in Oxford. But it's just never worked all year. When they've been good, or I'm not going to say good, like when they've shown signs of being a decent offense, they've run it like a college. First drive against Virginia Tech in the opener. A lot of the first drives this year, they've come out, really kept the defense off balance, done some creative things, and then they revert. Now against Alabama, they seem to kind of keep some of that stuff going, past the first drive. Because again, in the NFL, you watch ball on Sundays. That's what they do. First drives usually, whatever team comes out and fires. Oh, they trick you a little bit. They have some new stuff in the game plan, which they have all day, every day to work on all week. They come in there. Oh, whoa, they got us there. But then adjustments are made, and then they kind of spend a little bit of time trying to soften up the defense, run the football till they get to the next thing. In college, there's not time. You don't do that. It's a momentum game. You attack. Now, that doesn't always mean you're like Tennessee and, you know, going a million miles an hour and dependent on the accuracy of your quarterback all the time. Um, you're trying to find ways to be balanced and really keep it off balance. I mean, here's an example with Brian Rowe. That little flare pass out in the flat, they've run that several times this year and had some success with it. Brian Rowe was a shoestring trip up away from maybe going to the house with that. It was so wide open. And it may be that that's like a wheel route that the running backs run. When you run a wheel route, the defense adjusts. You can only run it like once or twice. You're not going to get that all the time. So maybe it's like that, and that's why they don't go to it. But Rowe, and then they just never went back to anything out there on the perimeter. I mean, it was just I don't understand why that was the plan. The last drive of the first half, a minute 39, they're huddling up. That tells me that operationally, play calling wise, there just wasn't a lot of definitive. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to run it till you stop it. Run it till you stop it. That's college, man. Sometimes they stop it. You got to go to try to do something else. And sometimes if that's the best thing you can do and the other team's stopping it, that's a bad day on offense in college. But you don't get away from what works, and you don't not counter off of that. Somebody said today that they couldn't believe that Shane Beamer was having all these problems with offensive coordinators because he has. Well, and mentioned Will Muschamp. Well, Will Muschamp, all three of the guys that called plays for him, I would take them over this. I think if Kurt Roper were calling plays for the Gamecocks right now, as frustrating as that was to watch, I don't think there'd be a problem. I think this team would have a winning record. And so it was schematic, it was play calling, and I'll say this too. Sometimes it's easy to blame play calling because you can say, basically to all of us out here, great play call if it works, bad play call if it doesn't. Right? Yeah, that's simple. That's simple. And sometimes when you had Lenore Sellers last year, the play that was called was not what happened. He would just run through like against Clemson. But so sometimes it's not always play calling. And there were some situations last night that weren't plays to be had there. But this year, the overall thing, I think we knew Mike Shula knows a lot about offensive football. I think we knew Mike Shula can coach quarterbacks based on his. What we didn't really know, because in the NFL, he had the one good year with the Panthers, and I don't think anybody should have ever thought, probably the worst idea looking back on it was anybody ever saying, well, he coached Cam Newton with the Panthers, we can do similar things here. You need to be going look at what they do at Auburn with Cam Newton, with Gus Malzahn, that kind of thing. Because college is different, folks. It's just different. Cam Newton was by the time he took the Panthers to Super Bowl, had worked in a pro style offense for how many years? Gosh, he was 2010 was his senior year. Panthers went to the Super Bowl. So he's 5 years into the NFL. Of course, he's going to look good and be able to run that. Lenore Sellers, and last year's offense with Dowell Loggins had some elements of that, but he picked that up fast. If you remember, he got better and better and better. This year he's gotten worse. And there's just no rhyme or reason, rhythm. And, when you can't block and your backs really aren't playing great, they're okay. They're doing some good things, but you just can't sit there and try to force the run. You got to find a way to run the ball. That's different, So so what do? You kind of maybe do what Ole Miss was doing last night early, and some reverses and some other things here and there. Run the quarterback, keep them off balance. And then Carolina never seemed to do this. It's real frustrating, like this stubborn. Let's man, look, Michigan in 2023 is the only college football team that's won a championship doing that. And they're in the Big Ten where everybody tries to kind of beat you in the face. And even with all of that, they're lucky they didn't play Georgia that year because I think Georgia could have beaten them. And number two, they had to go to overtime to beat kind of a so-so Alabama team, Saban's last team in the Rose Bowl. So you're in the SEC, it is wildly unrealistic to think you can go out there and run the ball like you're an NFL team. And even if you can, it's a different game. You have to attack, be creative. That's what's fun about coaching college football. And that's what really surprised me about, I think Dowell Loggins got it after a while. He looked like he was having fun. But Marcus Satterfield and Mike Shula both, it's just, I mean, Satterfield had no excuse. He had only been up there for a year. Once he started calling them like college, though, look at what happened. I don't think Shula was ever going to get there. I don't think he had that in him because he hadn't run an offense in college in 20 years, and unfortunately, this just passed him by. And I hate that. I hate that. I hate that for him. I hate that for this team and this program. But absolutely, Shane Beamer made the right move, albeit 9 games in, worst offense since '99. You know, I don't know. So where do they go from here? Elliott and Fury, short term, long term. We'll see. What happens. I don't think. No offense to those guys, but I think given that there's been some internal promotions around here that haven't worked out. Brian McClendon back in the day. And then, Mike Shula this year. I understand the fan base would probably not want that to be a permanent thing. And I get it. But we'll see how they do. I think that, all this does really is pull the Band-Aid off or pop the balloon, so to speak. I mean, you have to roll with the punches. And, that game at the end of the year, if they'd have stuck to doing what they're doing, they lost yesterday. And boy, they're saying the same thing probably about their defense today at Clemson as Carolina's offense. But they can score and they could put enough up. They have enough skill talent to put enough up. If Carolina's only scoring 1 touchdown, 2 touchdowns, I mean, you can't do that and expect to win against anybody. And I even mentioned Coastal was kind of in peril. So hopefully the new guys or the old new guys or the new play callers can, get that out there and get them moving in the right direction, at least be competent play calling wise, operationally and all that. Doesn't mean things are going to all of a sudden turn around like they did in 2022. That was a different scenario, but I do think it means that you don't have to sit there and watch the same plan week after week, which was horribly frustrating and completely unfair to everyone involved, from the players to the fans. I just think that this was something that should have maybe been recognized a little earlier. But at least they did it and got there. Some coaches absolutely will not make a move. So I credit Shane Beamer with doing it. I kind of wish the Lonnie Teasley one would have come before the open date. This one is coming before an open date, so we'll see how it all plays out. But I just think that it sucks to be right sometimes. Not to sound like who was the presidential candidate that said he voted for something before he voted against John Kerry. Well, I was actually for this before I was against it. Yes, I was. And I'll admit that. And I would like to go back in time and inform myself in the spring and summer of this year and last winter that I was being a dumbass and that all this was going to happen. I didn't see it coming. Nobody else in the building did. I got a text after the Oklahoma game from a contact that said, "We have some problems on offense none of us saw coming." And that means that he's like, you know what the move is. So hopefully they can kind of get out of this. It's hard, even when you do it, when you change like this. There's certain other things that happen with being on the same page and things like that. So I'm certainly not expecting miracles, but sometimes it works. Arkansas got rid of Dan Enos in the Pittman era and went down to Florida and won with a guy that was just dialing them up. We know the Jerry Neuheisel thing out at UCLA worked, at least for a while. So we'll see kind of what happens moving forward. If after this, if I'm South Carolina, I'm looking at a lot of different options. Beamer, make sure it's college offense. You're not going to get nobody's going to accept any NFL OCs besides maybe a handful that have been in college. Um, or like Cliff Kingsbury would be good. He's dialing up at A&M and Texas Tech, so he knows kind of the difference. But they need to go in a different direction. Look at what Indiana's doing on offense. That's a good system. That's a very, very good. That's very hard to defend with what they do because it puts the defenses. That guy's name's Mike Shanahan. He's not related to the Shanahans of the NFL, which is a good thing. Because it consistently, you don't know why they're good and why they blow people out because you're making defenses think over and over and over again. Whereas South Carolina's offense was the polar opposite. Defenses don't have to think because you're not spreading them out or putting them in conflict, and your offense is thinking way too much, including your quarterback, who can be an outstanding NFL quarterback one day, but is not there yet. And I don't know why there was the need to put him there. Um, I'm not saying I don't know that I don't think Shane Beamer can hire Mike Shanahan from Indiana, but something like that, something like that. That's kind of kind of modern collegiate offense. I think would be a good thing, and I'll take give me the whole Cheesecake Factory level menu and choose. Just make sure it's all college, no NFL. That's a bad egg, folks. It's a bad egg. It doesn't work, and just people need to admit that, and most of all of us do. You know. All right, don't forget Rooster Rant tonight. I'll be back to do that with Matt and Alex, and the Mad Dog, I think, is going to be on too. Maybe not on, but behind the scenes. I'll be back tomorrow with more of the show, the morning show, coffee, lots to talk about. Stay tuned to thebigspur.com for complete coverage of everything concerning a new offensive day, a new day on offense at the University of South Carolina. All right, I'm out, folks. Have a good one.